Taylor, and it was as much fun as I can have. Having a steak and talking to football coaches for 2 hours. That sounds like a good night. I spent some time sitting next to Mario Cristobal, Oregon football. Grew up, and it starts to smell different. You can start smelling gas.
What's up, guys? So today, something a little bit different on the channel. Today, I'm going to go through my process on how to trim, smoke, rest, slice, and serve up a brisket here in the great state of Texas. So I know it's a little bit different from what we're used to, but I have had a few people tell me what my process is, so we're going to go ahead and take care of that today. Hope you enjoy. So guys, one of the first things that we're going to do is we're going to set up the pit. Got the smoker box. We're going to wait for the smoke to start coming up. We got the temperature going right now. We're going to be cooking this brisket at 225 degrees until we reach an internal temperature about 165 degrees. At that point, I will take it off the smoker. I'm going to wrap it in foil, put it into a pan, and then I'm going to let it smoke out here for another 5 to 6 hours for usually a grand total of 12 to 14 hours till the internal temperature reaches between 203 and 205 degrees. So right now we're getting the smoke. See the smoke kind of coming out here on the smoker. So let's get it closed off and let's get the temperature up. Okay, so let's go ahead and get this brisket trimmed. Now the brisket that I got already had the decal fat removed. That's the decal that goes between the flat and the point. And you'll see it on the brisket right here. You'll see where the flat kind of takes over and the point kind of takes over, I'm sorry. And you kind of start getting the more fattier part of the brisket. The lean part is the one that we're gonna slice against first when we get ready to slice down at the end. But right now I've got my trusty fillet knife, whatever you wanna call it. It's bent kind of at an angle. Usually what you want to do if you're going to trim the fat off a brisket, you want to make sure you do that cold. As fat sits, it starts getting more mush and more tougher to trim. So you want to make sure you trim this brisket cold, but then you want to make sure that you get it up to room temperature. So once I trim it and season it, I leave it out usually for about 30-45 minutes, let it get up to room temperature, and then I throw it on the smoker. Now some people do try to get a fake smoke ring by putting the brisket on the smoker cold, which you can do. You're able to get kind of a faux smoke ring, but if you do it right and you smoke it right and you leave it and you don't mess around with it, you should get the better smoke ring after about 12 to 14 hours on the smoker. So let's go ahead. I'm going to show you what I do when I trim. I'm going to put the camera down and I'm going to show you exactly what I do. Okay guys, so before we get started, make sure you wash the old hands. This brisket is pretty trimmed already. There's not a lot of fat on here, but usually what you want to start doing is at least removing some towards the bottom. Let me move the camera a little bit. Towards the bottom right here, there might be some silver skin on the very top of the brisket. You could definitely remove that. And it's really trimming is just personal taste. If you are of the mindset that you do not like a fatty brisket, then you can definitely trim off as much as you want. I come from about 80-20 sometimes, depending on what I'm going to use it for. If I'm going to just do chop barbecue out of everything and just chop the hell out of it and make chopped sandwiches, then I really don't trim off a lot of fat because we all know fat is flavor. But if there's some really hard fat, which I'll show you if this brisket has, you're definitely going to want to remove that because that's not even good enough to make sausage, anything like that. So you want to make sure you're trimming, you know, fat that you know you're never going to need, but not trimming too much. So that way, you know, your brisket does come out still, because as I mentioned, fat will render and fat is flavor, and you definitely don't want to have no fat on here because then your brisket will be extremely dry. Boom, look at that. Alright, so let's adjust the camera real quick. I'm going to get you from the other side. Okay guys, so on the back of the brisket you can see right here that it's not horribly fatty. They've already removed the decal. The decal runs right here. And you can kind of see it also running on the sides. You can see where the flat and the point meet right here, this line right here. Ultimately, I'm just trying to trim off a little bit of the fat. There's quite a bit down here, and depending on your family, if they like a little bit of a fattier brisket, that's cool. My family doesn't really, so I'm going to trim off some fat here on the bottom. And again, see, because the brisket is relatively cool, the fat comes off pretty easy. You just get down there with your knife, kind of trim as much as you can. And again, it's all to personal taste. I have had times where I don't even trim any of it. The fat looks good, so all I do is just season it up, throw it on there. Sometimes I'll inject, sometimes I don't. Right now I'm not going to inject, but if I would inject, usually it's a can of beef consomme, Campbell's, or if you get brisket mops, if you do, or brisket injectors, things like that, you can get that. What I'm doing now is more looking for the shape of a brisket, because on the smoker you're going to want the smoke to usually hit at the point and then kind of go like this. You can see a little bit of the silver skin on there, right here. I'm not going to worry about taking that off. Now here's a little trick that I can't remember who I first learned from. So you're always going to want to slice against the grain. So you can see the grain going this way, right? You're always going to want to chop when you're done this way. So there have been times that people will put a toothpick on the end. What I like to do is just chop off on the edge a little piece. That way when it's done smoking, I know that the area that's kind of got this little slice off, that's where I know that I'm going to start doing my chops. Now some people will be like, well, you just took off one of the ends right here. Burnt ends actually are from back here, not in the front. So to me it doesn't really matter. Plus that's going to get charred up. It's going to get some nice bark once I put the rub on it. So this brisket didn't have a whole lot of fat on it, so kind of flip it. Always check under. And there's a little bit here. You can see outside the smoker's getting up to temp. There's a lot of smoke. See, here's a good example right here. This part has already gotten a little bit to room temperature. So when you try to cut the fat, it's a little bit more difficult to cut. See? So you might run into it in a few spaces, but you definitely don't want to let the brisket come up to room temperature. And then, I mean, you can, but it's just going to be a much bigger pain in the butt to get this fat off. And just get a little bit more right here. All right. So this right here looks to me perfectly trimmed. There's nothing really under here. Flip this bad boy over. Now what you also want to do is, some of the meat might be gray. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. It just means that when it was done by the butcher or by the big commercial slicer, it left that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to kind of trim that gray meat off, just so that way, you know, that's just a personal preference. You can see right here it's a little bit gray and then red. So let me get that done real quick. Alright guys, so I got everything taken care of. I got all the fat removed. The brisket looks good. It's aerodynamic. Smoke is going to hit here and then kind of go this way. And today we're going to be utilizing Traeger beef rub. Picked this up at one of my local barbecue shops, Barbecue Outdoors, Barbecue Outfitters. Definitely recommend them if you're in the San Antonio, Bernie area. So let's go ahead and get this seasoned up. Okay guys, so the brisket has been rubbed. You can see it right there. Now the way you know a brisket is ready to go on the smoker is that it starts getting wet like that. You could tell that the rub has started to seep into the meat. That's how you know that the brisket has been properly seasoned and is ready to get put on the pit. Now I'm going to let it come up to room temperature a little bit more. It's been out for about 30 minutes. I'm going to probably give it another 15, 20, maybe a full hour. Then I'm going to throw it on the smoker. So we'll be back when I'm throwing it on the smoker. Okay guys, so we're about to put the brisket on. You can kind of see it in the back over there. But I decided to also make a pot of beans. So I was getting them all ready. So the beans are just being put on right now, slow cooker. I'm going to slow cook them for about 8 hours. Threw in some jalapenos, some tomatoes, some fresh garlic, onion, some spices that I like to put in there. So hopefully the beans will be ready right as we're ready to slice the brisket. So we got these beans going, going to cook them slow for 8 hours. Now let's get the brisket on the pit. Ready, here we go. Alright everybody, there's the brisket, putting it in the center. You see the rub kind of already setting in on it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take these probes right here and we're going to put one in the point and then we're going to put one in the flat. And again, the goal is to get 165 degrees before we wrap it and take it off. Guys, there you got it. There's the first probe right there, second probe right there. And again, we're going to try to get 165 before we take it off the pit. See you guys in about 4 hours. Alright guys, so what's up? These are the beans after about an hour, slow cooking for 8 hours. So we've been going for roughly an hour here on the beans. Whoa, steamy. They're just starting to now take a little bit of color. Let's go check on the brisket. Thing that I did forget to mention, guys, is I usually spritz with some apple cider vinegar and some beef broth, beef consomme. I usually squirt about every 30-45 minutes. You can see right there, brisket is coming along nicely. You can hear the fire going, you can hear the fire box. And again, we're shooting for that 165 temperature. Usually keep this inside. So we're probably about an hour or so into the cook as well, maintaining at 225 degrees, and I'll be back here in a few hours. Alright guys, so it's been roughly about 3.5 hours. You can see all the smoke kind of coming out. Right now, if you check the probes right here, so the first probe, which was put in the fattier part, and the point is at 147, and if we check the second probe, we'll see we're there as well. So we're inching along. Just open it up real quick. Now what you do not want to be doing is constantly opening up your pit. There's a saying that goes around that says if you're looking, you're not cooking, or you ain't cooking. That definitely holds true. Good barbecue is going to take time. It's going to take hours upon hours. So if you're looking for a quick brisket, 2 to 3 hours, this is not for you. Put it in the oven, do something else, but do not think about smoking a brisket if you're trying to get it done in that amount of time. You're going to have to spend an entire day. If you've got a much bigger brisket, it's going to take you hours upon hours. This one weighed about 9 to 10 pounds, so it's going to take me about the 8 to 10 hours. If you have a much larger one, it's going to take you about 14 to 16 hours. There's been cooks that I had to put the brisket on about 11 o'clock at night the day before, and it doesn't come off the pit until about 5 o'clock the following afternoon. Constant fire management, constantly making sure that your fire is up. You don't want an entirely dirty fire. You don't want plumes of smoke coming out. And you definitely don't want to be checking the pit over and over, which is why I love the fact that I've got these outside thermometer probes. Don't have to open it up. But what I'm doing is just going to open it up right now and look for color, check the bark, see how everything is. So let's take a look. So you'll see, you want to kind of fiddle around with it. You can kind of see some of the juices coming out. But it is looking amazing. So we're gonna go ahead and close that. And we'll probably check it out here in the next couple hours. We're looking for that 165, and then we'll wrap. So we'll come back when we're wrapping it up. So one thing that I did want to show you guys is the beans. Now, we put them on for 8 hours. We've got 4 hours and 43 minutes left. So they've been cooking for about 3 hours and 25 minutes. Cooking them in a slow cooker with pressure. It's kind of a dual thing. So let the pressure out. So that way, you know, you don't blow things up. And then we're going to take a look and see what they look like. So they are coming along pretty good. Everything looks good. They're still obviously not up to softness to eat, but almost halfway through. The color's coming in. Everything looks good. Yep. Alright guys, we'll be back in a few hours for the brisket and the beans. Okay guys, so we are just about to take off the brisket. It has reached 165 degrees. Talking about earlier about injecting or not injecting, this brisket I chose not to inject, however sometimes I will. When I don't inject though, I usually use this. Remember I talked about beef consomme? I use this within the foil. So we got some foil here. We're going to throw the brisket right here, turn it into like a little boat on its sides, pour in the liquid, wrap it up real tight, throw it back on the pit, and now here's where the stall is going to happen. So let me tell you a little bit about what that means. So as you're cooking a brisket, the temperature is going to slowly start going up. You're going to start seeing it climb and climb, and then you're going to reach the stall. The stall usually happens around this time, about 150 to 165 degrees. So it took the brisket a little bit longer to hit that 165 degree mark. If you choose not to wrap, here's where it's going to flatline and stay like that for about an hour or so. So if you keep going, checking your temperature, and it still says 165 and it doesn't move, or it's like 165, 162, and then maybe jumps to 167, 168 for about an hour, leave it alone, don't touch it, Don't be opening up the pit. Let it stall. It's going to stall out. The meat is tightening up. It's losing its juices, and it's getting really tight, so the temperature is going to stay roughly the same. After about 30-45 minutes to an hour, then the temperature is going to go up. Now, if it's been like that for over an hour, almost going on 2 hours, then you've got a problem. Potentially increase your flame, add a little log on the fire, make it a little bit hotter, so that way the smoke now can increase that temperature. But don't freak out when it stalls like that. It's called the stall. So if you Google that, you'll know what I mean, and it will do that on purpose. So don't freak out. Now let's go get that brisket off the pit, and I'm going to show you what I do here on the foil. Okay guys, so here we are, 165 degrees internal temperature. Got my can of beef consomme right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold this bad boy up. But before I do that, I am going to hit this with a little bit more of the Traeger rub that we're trying out today. We're using the Traeger beef rub today. I'm going to go ahead and just sprinkle a little bit more of that. Get that last ounce of flavor in there. And then I'm going to wrap this. I'm going to boat it. I'm going to wrap it. Use some of the beef consomme in there, or the whole can actually. Pour it all in there. Wrap it up real tight. And then throw it back on the pit. So I'll see you guys out there. Alright guys, so I'm going to cut in right here and show you what I meant. So see, I've kind of boated it on each side. And all I'm going to do is take my can of beef consomme. Pour some on one side. Pour some on the other side. Just get it in there. And that's going to add two things. It's going to add more moisture to the chamber, so that way the brisket doesn't dry out. And it's going to add a little bit more of that beef flavor, which is what you're looking for when you cook Texas brisket. So I'm going to go ahead and finish foiling this up. I'm going to double foil it so that way I don't lose any juices. And on top of that, here's a little trick also that I learned from a barbecuer named Myron Mixon, big Southern Georgia famous barbecuer. Wrap it all up, but then also throw it in one of these. And what that's going to do is, just in case your foil tears or anything like that, you're going to secure that juice, because a lot of times that juice, if you put it through a grease separator, it'll actually make a real au jus sauce, a really good au jus sauce that if you're going to make some brisket sandwiches later, you could sprinkle a little bit of that on there and it gives it a great, great flavor. So let me finish wrapping this up and I'll see you guys on the pit. Alright guys, we are out here on the pit. Got the brisket going on right there. Now we're reaching for that internal temperature of 205 to 208 degrees. So I'm going to check it back here in probably in about an hour to two. Cranked up the temperature now. I'm cooking at about 250 to 265. You don't really have to do that, but I'm trying to get this brisket done here quicker because we're trying to eat sooner. That is something you can do, but it's not always recommended. But I'm trying to cook a little faster, so I increased the temperature just a little bit, and that should put the overall cook time at about 10 hours versus 12 hours. So next time you'll see it, the brisket will be done. I'm going to let it rest, and then it's going to be ready for slicing. So next time you see it, the brisket's going to be all cut up, or I'll actually show you how to cut the brisket. So I'll see you in a bit. Alright guys, so the brisket is now done. We have reached an internal temperature of 205 degrees at the point. The flat is a little bit hotter. The flat right now is at 207, which is fine. The flat will usually get hotter because it is thinner, but we're looking for that thicker cut of meat to be at the right temperature. So we hit it, 205. I'm going to take it off. I'm going to wrap it in a blanket. Any kind of blanket. If you have a towel, just what I would not recommend is putting it in one of these Yeti coolers, and the reason why is that those hold temperature very well, and what we're trying to do is let the meat rest and let the juices and let it cool down a little bit, and we're letting the juices go out again. Putting it in a Yeti cooler keeps temperature, so essentially you're continually cooking it while putting it in one of those coolers. So what I usually do, grab a quick $10, $15 moving blanket, or if you have a couple towels, wrap it in that, bathrobe, anything like that. Let it sit for about an hour. Let the juices disperse, and then we'll start slicing. So next time you'll see me, we'll be slicing the brisket. Alright guys, so the brisket is done. There it is. And I am about to slice it up. So remember the little chop that we did over here? That's how I know that I'm slicing against the grain. First slice. That's how you know if a brisket is good. You got the pink ring, a little bit of fat, and it doesn't fall apart, but the moment you pull it, comes apart. Camera lady, would you like a bite?
Yes, I would.
Cut off that fat, because I know you don't like the fat. Alright, so a good rule for cutting a brisket, when you get to the lean part, is pencil thin, or pencil wide, so about 1/4 inch. Usually I do mine a little bit bigger. And that's how you know the brisket is good. You see the smoke ring. And again, you do the pull test. Pull open, doesn't fall apart, but the moment you tug it, it falls right apart. Alright. Okay guys, so the brisket has been fully cut. You can see right there. There's the leaner part. There's the fattier part. That's the flat. That's the point. Brisket was on the grill or on the smoker for roughly 12 hours. Got some rice going on way back over there, and then got our pot of beans right here. So we will be enjoying some great barbecue tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, hit that bell icon, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.